Finding the appropriate strategies and funding sources to make your drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities more resilient to climate change can be challenging, especially for small resource-challenged communities. To help utilities identify potential long-term adaptation options and better decision-making related to the implementation and financing of infrastructure, the U.S. EPA developed the Creating Resilient Water Utilities, or CRWU, initiative. CRWU provides water sector utilities with practical tools, training, and technical assistance needed to increase resilience to extreme weather events. It takes into account science data and puts it into a usable format for water sector utilities so that they can start to address and adapt to climate change impacts. And CRWU includes several tools, such as the Resilience Strategies Guide and the Climate Resilience Evaluation and Awareness Tool, known as CREATE, and additional resources like case stories and climate change maps. To use the CRWU tools, you will need to know the assets of your utility and local priorities. To demonstrate how to use the Resilience Strategies Guide, one of the 2 tools available in CRWU, I'm going to use this following scenario. Anytown, Maryland has a wastewater treatment plant that serves a population of less than 10,000 people. Its assets include a conveyance system, a data acquisition system, and facilities and buildings on site. The priorities of the wastewater treatment operators are to better manage water demand and energy demand on its system. Municipal leaders in Anytown also want to increase the amount of green infrastructure within the community and have identified the wastewater treatment plant as a potential location for green infrastructure projects. At this point, I'm going to take you directly into the CRWU tool. And this is what the landing page looks like. As you can see, the different tools are going to be listed here. The additional resources, such as the climate data maps, are going to be here, and the additional resources, such as training and case stories, are here. Today, I'm going to use you how to use the Resilience Strategies Guide, and as you can see, this is going to take you through a 5-step process to identify potential priorities and funding to get those projects done. So like I mentioned, you're going to need to know some basic things about your utility. So we know that at Anytown, we're talking about a wastewater utility. It's in Maryland, and it serves a population of less than 10,000. I had mentioned that our 3 local priorities were water demand management, green infrastructure implementation, and energy management. I encourage you, as you're going through and looking through the tool, to take your time, click on more info to learn a little bit more about each of the priorities. But I had already identified the ones here. When you're done identifying your priorities, it's time to put your assets in. Like I mentioned, we have buildings on site, we have a collection and conveyance system, we have data acquisition system, and we are a wastewater treatment plant. Again, you can click on more info if you need a little better understanding of what each of these things are. And for my priorities and assets, the scenario I put in, 64 strategies were found to increase resiliency of the system. I already went through and identified assessing green infrastructure approaches, encouraging water conservation on site, implementing green infrastructure on site. In the long term, I think it would be smart for any town to plan and establish alternative or on-site power supply would be a good strategy. And lastly, I think it would be really important for them to start thinking about improving their energy efficiency. Again, take your time going through, discuss this internally, both within your utility, but also with the local government to understand and be on the same page. And lastly, the last step are funding sources. As you can see here, what's really great is if you click on each funding source, it gives you a description, how to apply, how much you can apply for, contact people, and a website landing page. So there's a lot of really great information in one place here. I already went through and looked through the funding sources. There are 4 funding sources that I think make a lot of sense for any town that I will select. But obviously you would take your time going through this, reading about each of them. The ones that I thought made the most sense for any town are the community block development block grants. There's both one at the national level through HUD, and there is a state level one that I thought made sense. I also thought that the Maryland Smart Energy Communities program made a lot of sense for any town. And lastly, I identified there is a program called the Planning Program and Local Technical Assistance Program, which is right here. So when you're done picking out your priorities, assets, strategies, and funding, going through that simple process, you can do 2 things. You can either generate a report, which really consolidates everything into one place. There's your priorities, there's your assets, there's your strategies. Here's your funding sources, complete with contact person, and links to learn more. The great thing about those funding sources are it's everything from loan programs to grant programs. There's a lot of options there. So really take your time to understand what your options are and have those conversations internally as to what makes the most sense for you. And lastly, if you wanted to do a more full-blown risk assessment analysis, you can actually take this report and feed it directly into the CREATE tool. Again, CREATE is the Climate Resilience Evaluation and Awareness tool, and it really allows water utilities to do a full-blown risk assessment and evaluate the effectiveness of the strategies that you selected. To do that, you can export the report files from the Resilient Strategies Guide and import them into the CREATE tool. So if you are interested in using CREATE to assess the effectiveness of your strategies, it is a more intensive process. There are 5 modules that you have to go through, but luckily there are free trainings available to show you how to do this. You can either use the EPA's webinars available on their training center. The link is on your screen, or through the EFC network. We have several training events, both in person and online, including upcoming trainings on how to use the CREATE tool, and the link to those trainings are there.